Yes, we got those. This is a regular meeting of the Planning Board of the Township of Middletown. Pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act, the laws of 1975, the public has been notified that the Planning Board will meet on April 23rd, 2014 at 6:30 p.m. at Town Hall. Middletown Planning Board notified the Edinburgh Park Press and the Star Ledger, the Two River Times, on December 20th, 2013. Notice of the meeting was filed with Township Clerk and posted in Town Hall on December 20th, 2013. All notification for this meeting is given pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act at least 48 hours prior to the meeting. Roll call.
Mrs. Carroll. Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Reyes.
Here.
Mr. Heck.
Yes.
Mr. Cardell.
Here.
Mr. Oshman. Mr. Grafton.
Here.
Mrs. Genius. And Mr. Wilkie.
All rise to salute the flag.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Derek, could you read the agenda, please? We have no resolution.
We have one.
It's an extension of time for Reed. It's their last one-year extension of time.
So moved. On that extension.
Second. Roll call.
Second. Mark, second.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Heck.
Yes.
Mr. Cardell.
Yes.
Mr. Grafton.
Yes.
There was one small item that I don't know where you would. There's a pending litigation in American Properties, and there's a request to allow the objector to intervene. So I don't have any problem with that, but before I signed off on that consent order, I just wanted to make sure that the board was okay with it. So American Properties is in litigation. The town's been sued, the board's been sued by the developer, got turned down. And there is an objector, intervener, and they're asking for permission to intervene in the case. So I don't have any problem with it, but I didn't want to sign off on that, but at least that were the board's intention. So we don't need a formal vote, we don't need a formal resolution. I just want to make sure that it's okay with the board.
Very good. I apologize. I need a motion for the approval of the minutes of April 2nd, 2014.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay. This is an open meeting. This is an open meeting to the public. Is there anything not on the agenda that the public would like to bring before us? Okay, seeing none, we move on to administrative matters. I don't see the vouchers.
I have.
Oh, okay, Carl Scott, that's right.
I make a motion to approve vouchers for James Gorman, T&M Associates, BPM Engineering, and Approved Planning Board vouchers totaling $11,888. I have reviewed the said vouchers.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. So moved. All right, that brings us to old business, Trinity Hall.
Mr. Chairman, John Junko appearing on behalf of Trinity Hall. When we were last at the hearing, our first witness, Mr. DeCina, was asked to be cross-examined. At that point, at that meeting, the court asked that we can go through the cross-examination, same sequence of testimony was presented. The next witness we presented was Jamie Maesler. Ms. Maesler is here and ready to proceed.
Well, does it matter in what order they go?
In this particular instance, I would like to finish Ms. Maisler this evening because she is probably not going to be available for our next meeting. That's what the board had already said, we were going to go in that manner, so that's how we prepared.
I think that Mr. Gazarovski can call to cross-examine in whatever order he feels appropriate, but recognizing that the architect gave limited testimony and can't be here for,
Okay.
okay. I think that's a reasonable request, so. Prepared to go forward?
I wasn't present when this was gave her testimony in business. My understanding is there were two architects of the school, is that correct?
Yes,
One of them, I think the term said, dealt with the HVAC, the other dealt with the architectural aspect of it. What is this?
correct. This was Ms. Maisler who testified at the first meeting, and the transcripts, you actually provided the transcript to me. What was your-
She was the architect who described the architecture of the building, that's fine.
And
I have no objection to this proceeding.
Well, he's done.
He's done.
So-
He wants the objectors, or whoever it be, me or others, to proceed to cross-examine that witness. I have no objection.
The public has cross-examined all of the witnesses contemporaneous with their testimony, or continue to the next evening. So at this point in time, whatever witnesses you want to call Mr. Gazarovski to cross-examine and bring them back up, it's your call. I think with that proviso that perhaps the architect could be called now, so it's not an issue down the road.
And I can advise you that both of my remaining witnesses are here and available. So just, so with that, let's call Ms. Maisler.
My understanding was that the public has not had an opportunity to cross-examine this witness. If you recall, the last time we were here, the public was twice that I cross-examined, and I believe during the day.
There was cross-examination at the January hearing.
Yeah, I went through my notes today, and my notes reflect that the witnesses, as they were called, were cross-examined. So
No, it's not.
Oh, it's in the transcript, so.
Read the minutes and those notes.
Mr. Justina was cross-examined. Let's go back.
That's the only one who was cross-examined.
Well, let's go back.
It was for us,
Let's go back, John. Let's look at it. You know, can I ask that on behalf of the court reporter that you keep the sound down as low as possible, because the court reporter is reacting to sounds, and it's very difficult if there's a lot of discussions, mumbling, and whatever. It makes her job impossible. So she's not going to complain, but I'm going to complain for her. Mr. Messina testified in January. Make sure we're all in agreement. Mr. Katriniak testified in January. Ms. Maisler testified in January. At the end of that evening, there was cross-examination by the public of those witnesses. There was. Well, I'm not going to...
Hold on, this isn't a discussion item for the public.
I mean,
It is not.
I have in my notes a number of different people who got up and asked questions that evening at the end of that proceeding. It got carried into February 19th. February 19th. There was continued testimony by Mr. Katriniak. My notes on that night. Mr. You have a transcript in front of you?
I do.
Was there cross-examination that night?
From Mr. Katriniak?
No, I don't see that.
Okay, if you go back to the January meeting, back to that issue, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 members of the public conducted cross-examination at the January meeting. Borelli, Yamchez, Valenti,
There was cross-examination of the witnesses in January. The question is, was there cross-examination of Mr. Katriniak in February?
Give me 1 second. I think that there was, I don't think there was.
Okay. Then on, I don't want to get ahead of you. I think my notes reflect that the end of the night in February, Mr. Katriniak had completed his testifying and there was no cross.
Correct.
Then in March, the 19th of March, there was cross-examination of Mr. Messina. There were any number of people asking questions of your witness. Everybody was here. I don't have verbatim, but I have 20 or so names of people who got up and asked questions. And you had your witnesses available that evening.
Correct.
One witness.
Excuse me. You know, it's going to make it difficult to
One witness.
go back and forth.
You're not allowed to shout out. I'll ask you to leave next time you shout out.
But there was clearly Mr. Messina, Mr. Katriniak, Ms. Nasler, and
Mr. Alvarizio.
Alvarizio were here. There were questions on the 19th. That's what happened on March 19th. Last meeting, there was cross-examination by Mr. Gazarovski. He had requested that he have the ability to go at the end to ask questions of all your witnesses. And last time, the board finished, as Mr. Gazarovski finished cross-examination of Mr. DeCina. He's done.
Mr. DeCina is finished.
The other witnesses were cross-examined by the public, and Mr. Gazarovski has a right to cross-examine one or more of those witnesses at this point. And that's where we are. Procedurally, that's where we're at.
And that was my understanding. They're here and prepared to be cross-examined. And when that's completed, I understand that Mr. Gazarovski will present his affirmative case and will be given an opportunity for rebuttal. So I would anticipate that's the remaining process.
I mean, that's what my notes reflect. I have not gone through and read every page of the transcripts, but I was here. That's my- I think that's correct. So, okay.
Mr. Ray, Mr. Chairman, in January, he allowed all three of Mr. Junko's witnesses to go. And once they were all completed, then we opened it to questions of any and all three of them at the same time.
That's correct. And then what I'm saying is that Mr. Katriniak came back the following month, so he gave more testimony.
Right.
So
So
we
we
had
had your plans.
It had to be the ability to cross-examine on that. My notes reflect on the 19th, that in the February meeting, whatever date that was, there was no, I don't see any cross-examination that night. Then in March, all the applicant's witnesses were here, and there was extensive cross-examination by the public.
Only Mr. DeCina.
Only Mr. C. No, but that's the only question that were asked.
The only witness, and we took the entire evening.
That's correct.
Do you have the end of the transcript for the 19th? I'm sorry.
I do.
Can I,
You recall,
you know how many notes or anything here? No?
No.
when Mr. DeCina testified, the public went first and cross-examined. It was also the extensive. I then cross-examined, and that was the conclusion of the meeting. I don't know what happened with the prior meeting, actually, who the public cross-examined. There was President Gemma, who said the meeting before mine. I believe that was the meeting that gave extensive testimony. I don't believe he was cross-examined by the public.
That's what he's trying to determine.
Guys, well, look,
I don't know what the mystery is. We have the transcript right here, and I think DeCina, Nasler, and Katriniak testified in January. They were subjected to cross-examination by the public at the conclusion of the hearing, just as Ms. Euro said. In the February meeting, we presented testimony from Mr. Katriniak because we amended the plan. He was not cross-examined. In the March meeting, Brian DeCina, the civil engineer, was presented, and he was cross-examined by Mr. Gazarovski and again by the public. And at the conclusion of the hearing, actually, at the conclusion of his testimony and cross-examination, the hearing was closed.
That's correct.
And that leads us to tonight. And before that, I was under the impression that our witnesses be available for cross-examination. They are. If there's no cross-examination necessary, then it's the objector's affirmative case.
All right. Let me, I think looking at all the puzzle pieces, the only part that the public didn't get asked questions of was Mr. Katriniak on his supplemental testimony in February.
Correct.
Right? So to that extent, Mr. Katriniak is still subject to be cross-examined on by the public, but Ms. Maisler and the other architect,
Mr. Alvarez,
the public is done with Mr. Katriniak, because of the supplemental testimony in February, where there wasn't time that evening to cross-examine him, that is still subject to cross-examination.
we agree.
Can I ask one question? I was not present at this meeting, I represent the position. Would not it be appropriate for members of the public who were here at that meeting to speak as to whether or not they were given the opportunity to cross-examine?
We have transcripts. We have transcripts. We have transcripts. I mean, the only thing that we clarified by going through this was that Mr. Katriniak in February, there was no questioning by the public that so because it's hanging out there, that he's still subject to that. Now, quite honestly, it's going to be impossible for the board to say, oh, that was part of his January testimony, not part of his February. So he's subject to cross-examination by the public.
He is here and prepared.
So, well, it's up to Mr. I would suggest to the board that we leave it up to Mr. Gazarovski as to which witness he wants to cross-examine. He wants to cross-examine the architects, one or both, fine. Do that, then they're done. Then you can leave Mr. Katriniak. I think as a courtesy, since Ms. Maisler has got reasons why she can't be here, that we ask that she be done and finished tonight so that she doesn't have to be here at a subsequent meeting.
Yes, we do make that request.
I don't believe our cross-examination system will be on the end of the meeting. We'll pursue.
Okay. Who do you want sitting here?
Ms. Neighbors here, I think she indicated she wanted to go first. Ladies first.
Fine.
The only request I have is if we have previously marked the floor plans for the school, I'd like to have those put on the board. Where would you like the tripod to be, over there, over here? Wherever.
You know, that's going to be, if we're going to have a speaker at that podium, having somebody behind that's going to be
That
that.
we are.
So,
We don't need the podium there.
Yeah, you move, I'm sorry, Jason moved, but Jason's gonna move the podium back.
or move the boards, something. We shouldn't have them behind each other, that's too awkward.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Mason was sworn at the January meeting, and if you wish to re-swear her, she remains under oath.
She remains under oath.
Ms. Mason, you remain under oath for your January.
Yes, I do.
Good evening, Mr. Nicholas. I wasn't present when you first testified, but I assume that you are in fact a licensed architect, professional architect of the state of New Jersey.
Yes,
And what firm are you associated with?
designing a group.
You know what, you're gonna have to, yeah, get a little closer.
Sorry, what is the name of that?
Design Ideas Group, New Brunswick.
Okay. And that is an engineering firm, or architectural firm?
Architectural,
Okay. And how long have you been so employed by them?
nearly 2 years.
Okay, and prior to that, were you also employed as an architect?
Yes,
And with whom?
Fitzgerald Architecture, I
What was the year that you were graduated from undergraduate school, licensed as professional architect, and started your professional career?
graduated in 2000, licensed in 2007.
And since then, you've been working as a professional architect in the state of New Jersey?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you this. By whom were you retained or employed to design this school, the architectural design for the school itself?
Trinity Hall?
And did you also, in addition to designing the exterior of the school, did you also design all of the interior fit-outs of the school?
Yes.
And have you ever previously in your architectural career been responsible for designing a secondary school of this size?
Yes.
And when was that?
Several times in the past.
Okay, if you can, just give me the names of the schools that you designed.
North Hunterdon High School, North Hunterdon High School, not the entire high school, but additions to that high school. School 30 in Elizabeth, which is now called Ronald Reagan Academy. And there have been several additions and renovations to
Okay.
school projects over the years.
In those jobs, were you the primary architect, or were you working under someone else's guidance?
I was part of the design team,
Part of the design team.
yes.
With regard to this particular project, are you part of the design team, or are you the primary architect who designed the site?
I am part of the design team. I'm the project manager for this design team and part
Pardon?
of a design team, yes.
Okay, fine. How many other people are parts of that design team?
Just the architects?
Just the architects. Not counting the draft.
About 6.
So, what were your specific responsibilities as part of that design team?
I am in charge of assuring that the building is built to code, reviewing the building codes. I'm responsible for maintaining the project schedule. I'm responsible for contact with the client, arranging meetings, and supervising the other design team members,
Who did the actual drawing?
myself and others.
Okay. Now, am I correct in saying that the standards or the criteria for designing a private school, private high school such as this is different than designing a public high school?
Yes,
Okay. Public high schools are subject to a far more rigorous approval process by the state of New Jersey Department of Education as compared to the construction of a private high school, are they not?
I don't know.
Okay.
And the reason I don't know is because we have a pretty rigorous client who has high expectations of us.
Pardon?
So while we're not held to the state of New Jersey design standard, we are held to a very high standard of design.
What, you say you're held to the high standard of your client. Who is your client?
Trinity Hall.
Pardon?
Trinity
Well,
Hall.
who is the person at Trinity Hall that gives to you your
The committee.
direction with regard to how to design this facility?
The building committee.
Okay, and who's the chairman of the building committee? Who do you interact with?
There are 5 individuals, but the chairman of the committee is Victoria Gamelik.
Now,
Victoria Gamelik.
okay. Now, let me ask you this. Did you get any consideration whatever, or have any consultations whatever, with the Department of Education of the state of New Jersey with regard to the design of this school?
No.
Okay. Now, tell me if you can then, what expertise or what qualifications do the members of this building committee have to give you direction as to how they want this building built?
I don't have an answer.
Okay, that's fair enough. Now, when you design these previous schools, which you referred to, some of those were public schools, were they not?
Yes,
And they were subject to the oversight of the Department of Education.
yes.
And that required a variety of things you to do. For example, even with regard to site location, there had to be a determination as to whether or not the site in question was appropriate for that particular school or use. Is that not so?
I don't understand your question.
Okay. When a school, when a public school, if you know the answer to this, you may not know the answer. When a public school is being constructed, there is first a determination made as to the appropriateness of the site, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Tell me, if you can, what steps were taken as to this particular project to make the determination as to the appropriateness of this particular site?
I think we've already testified to that.
Well, I wasn't present when you testified.
No, not me.
That's not your fault.
The other testimony that Brian had given at the last hearing.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe that any member of the planning committee or any member of Trinity School has come forward and presented to this board testimony as to why they selected this site. And if you don't know the answer to that, that's okay.
Okay.
You know how they selected it.
I don't.
You have any idea what criteria they utilized or research they did with regard to determining the appropriateness of the site?
What I do know is that extensive research was done to find a site
And now,
prior to selecting this site. That's as much as I know.
you didn't participate.
I
though.
did not participate.
You simply were presented with a certain amount of acreage on a piece of property in Middletown, New Jersey, and your task was to design a school that fit within the parameters of that acreage, correct?
Correct.
Now, did you have anything to do at all with this plan other than to design it? In other words, you had no part in marketing the use or marketing the school or coming up with financial plans for the operation of the school or anything of that nature?
No.
Your job was simply to design the school itself?
Yes.
Okay, now, if you could tell me, you indicated that one of the responsibilities you had was compliance with the code. And I take it that when you say that, you're referring to the building code of the township of Middletown.
Yes.
Okay. Was there any other code other than that that you took into consideration, other than the local codes of the township of Middletown? You understand the question? You may
I
not
do
be.
understand the question, but I'm puzzled that you're asking about just Middletown, because Middletown is within the state of New Jersey, and it's the state of New Jersey that has jurisdiction.
Well,
So,
the
yes.
state-
So the answer to your question is yes.
Okay. State of New Jersey has jurisdiction as to certain construction items, but in this particular case, you are not subject to the state of New Jersey with regard to the design standards and the like for the construction of a private school, which I think they earlier testified to.
Is that a question?
Yeah. For example, I look at the,
I'm going to renew my objection that the cross-examination should be directed towards the testimony and questions related to the testimony that was presented.
But he can always question her credibility, her experience.
Into matters that she has testified to and to what she stands here as an expert in. Ms. Mason did not present herself as an expert in the approval process of public high schools to this board.
No, but it's a fair question. How many other schools have you designed?
I'm not objecting to that.
So the question on the floor is, what standards do you use to design it? And can't we all stipulate that the state has a building code? And did you design to the state building code?
Yes.
Okay.
well, I accept that. Now, I'm looking at the plans and I see a number of classrooms which are situated on that plan. Now, did you make a determination as to the, let's pick a classroom. You know, in looking at the classrooms, it would appear that the average classroom size appears to be 550 square feet. Would that be a fair comment?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know what the proposed number of students who will be in each of those classrooms?
Yes.
What is it?
Between 15 and 20 students.
Okay. Do you know what that breaks down to per square foot per child?
The code mandates 20 square feet per student.
Now, that's the code. That's the building code, which deals with general occupancy, does it not?
Correct.
Now, there's a different standard, though, in the Department of Education with regard to what the allocable square footage for a student will be, isn't there?
No,
There's not at all.
it's the same.
You're sure of that?
Well, I don't think you look for help.
I think it's the same. It's the same.
It is the
20
same,
square feet
per student.
per student.
Okay. Do you know whether there's reference in any of the manuals of the Department of Education that sets forth what the required square footage is per student?
Yes.
And do you have a copy of that with you?
No, I do not.
Okay. Have you read that before you came here, before you designed this project?
Yes.
Okay. And your testimony is that it's 20 square foot per student, not a number greater than that.
Didn't you ask me earlier whether I was under the jurisdiction of the state of New Jersey? And I said no.
Well,
For the Department of Education,
you know,
correct?
I'm not here to defense with you.
I know, I'm just making sure I understand your line of questioning. If your statement was that I don't need to be under the mandate of the Department of Education, then why are you asking me about Department of Education standards?
Can I intervene here a second? He's entitled to ask the questions, and what importance, that's another matter. So if he wants to ask you a question, under state, if this was a public school, what would be the standard?
Okay.
If that's the question, he can ask that. I don't know that's up to the board to determine how relevant that is.
Well, having said that, is your testimony that with regard to the design of this school, in addition to satisfying all of the code requirements of the construction department of the Township of Middletown and perhaps also the state of New Jersey, you have also satisfied all of the requirements as would be required of a public school by the Department of Education in the state of New Jersey?
I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. Now, with regard to the layout, and I would walk up there and look through it, but my understanding is that this project is being constructed in phases, correct?
Yes.
And the first phase, is the first phase on the board right now, which is exhibit, what is it?
A6.
Pardon me?
Exhibit A6.
Okay. Does that constitute the entire first phase?
Yes. The first phase of the academic building is represented on that plan.
Okay, then in addition to that, there's a gymnasium, is there?
Correct.
Okay. Now, with regard to the first phase, am I correct in assuming that there is provision for a nurse's office,
Yes.
provision for guidance counselors and the like?
Yes.
How about with regard to any special design standards for handicapped students? Is that provided for also?
Yes.
Can you show me where that is, please?
The entrance is accessible. There's an elevator to lead up to the second floor. This entire path of travel is accessible. The entire corridor is accessible, as it states on the
So
drawing.
your testimony is that all of the required state standards for the accessibility of handicapped students is provided for
Yes.
in this plan? Now, I take it that as the architect, you you really have no knowledge whatever as to the makeup of the student body with regard to the educational process for special students or disadvantaged students, and like that's beyond the kill of your testimony, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now, how about with regard to the safety measures which would be built into the school? Are they all provided for in this plan as far as backup generators? Is there any provision for cameras to be installed inside the school for security reasons and the like?
There will be safety measures to that extent for security and so forth. They are not complete.
Okay,
The design of those aspects are not completed.
they're in the design process?
Yes.
Okay, can you just, if you would, elucidate for me the necessary safety measures which you intend to place into this facility that are not shown at the present time, but you're saying will be completed and shown prior to the issuance of any building permit?
We have not completed the security design of the school at this time.
So you're unable to answer that question?
So I do not have an answer at this time.
In the first phase, is there a cafeteria?
Yes,
Okay,
but not in the traditional sense. I probably should have just stopped at yes, but they will be having lunch, either bag lunch in the school or bag lunch in the gymnasium space for the time being.
let's go back a step. My understanding, let's talk about the first phase first. What would be the maximum number of students that the first phase would be able to accommodate?
The maximum number of students that the
That
first
first
phase
phase, right.
can accommodate is, it has been designed to accommodate the 400 students.
Just in the first phase?
Yes,
As a matter of fact, isn't that what's designed for the entire complex, 400 students?
yes.
So are you saying that the balance of all the construction would basically be made up of the amenities? You know what I mean by that?
Yes.
Okay. Is that a correct statement?
I don't know, because we haven't finished designing the other phases. We have amenities such as the cafeteria in the future phases, but there are accommodations for future classrooms and future guidance offices and so forth, because as the student body grows, they will more than likely need additional spaces for the flexibility of the students to move.
Are they
between classes.
shown any plans which you submitted to this planning board?
Are what shape?
The future plans, the future cafeterias.
That is as much as I know at this time.
Well, but you're the architect who is in charge of designing this project, are you not?
Yes,
So are you telling me that all that you have here is all that has been designed thus far?
yes.
All right. Now, can you show me where the cafeteria is?
It is on the first floor.
Okay.
You're at the second floor there. That's the first floor at the top
That's
of
why you
the
have
L.
first floor written here.
That's
second
right,
floor written there.
that's right. Little hints for you. It's marked student commons.
Just remember this, someday it'll be old also. Where is this marked student commons?
Trying to avoid tripping the flyers. Here. Student cafe, excuse me. This is the cafeteria area.
Okay, fine.
Kitchen, servery.
Okay. Now, the kitchen itself only comprises 700 square feet. Now, will there be stoves in the kitchen?
Yes.
Are they shown in any plan?
All of this reflects the second phase of the drawing, of the design.
What are you going to have in the first phase? In other words, let me go back a step. This is what you're showing me over here. Is this part of the second phase or the
That's the
first?
second phase.
Well,
This is second
Let's stick with
phase.
the first phase.
First phase.
Is there a cafeteria in the first phase?
No,
There is not.
no.
Where are the students supposed to eat then?
The students will eat in the student commons here. They'll bring their own lunch for the time being.
What is the size of that commons room?
It's not marked here, but I think it's approximately, these go away, these fold away. So this entire space could be for the students. It's
Okay.
approximately 2,500 square feet.
Right now, what you're showing is an unmarked, I guess you refer to it as a says student alcove, but some type of common area. There's a total of 10 tables, 4 chairs per table, that accounts for 40 students, and you have 400 students in this school. Where do you feed?
Well, they're not going to have one lunch period, so I'll have
Pardon?
several lunch periods.
There's no lunch period?
There will be several lunch periods. This area will open up to accommodate all of the students. So there may be 2 or 3 lunch periods to accommodate all of the students.
This says general classrooms, though.
They're flexible classrooms. It's a flexible space.
This shows doorways for ingressing and egressing.
That's correct.
So how can they be then opened up if in fact you have seemingly stationary doorways going into the rooms?
We do also have an entire gymnasium space that if they exceed that, they will be able to have lunch in the gymnasium space.
Well, the gymnasium, though, is not attached to that.
No, they'll walk across campus to go into the gymnasium if they need to.
Okay. Are there tables and chairs there for the students to sit and eat?
There will be stored tables and chairs, folding tables and chairs for that purpose.
Now, with regard to, I'm sorry. So, am I correct in stating then that with regard to the first phase, the only space that will be available for the students to eat at is that which you have shown in an unmarked area, which is approximately how many square feet?
About 1,500 square feet.
You say, does that include the general classrooms that are in the back? Or does
It
not?
includes that area.
What if you don't include the classroom?
These areas will fold away, and this entire area will be.
Now, you're saying that each student will bring a box lunch, or there'll be some type of a catering service that comes in and delivers these box lunches to the students?
That extent of detail, I don't know.
You don't have knowledge. Okay. Now, we earlier asked the engineer with regard to some type of a phasing plan, but as I understand your testimony, the second phase of this project has not yet been designed.
I'm going to object. There's been no questions about the second phase. There hasn't been a comment about the second phase. If you're going to ask a question like that, there has to be some kind of foundation.
You know, we're all testing our memories here, so you gentlemen have had the benefit of transcripts and reading them through. I have them, I haven't gone through them line by line. Didn't she testify about the overall build-out and show what that would look like on a site plan?
Yes,
And that was one of your exhibits.
yes.
So if he's asking questions about what's in those buildings, how would...
Is that the question? Because I didn't understand it that way, I would say that's perfectly appropriate. We also noticed to the public about each phase and what would be in each phase, which is what our application reflects.
Well, and my question of her, I believe, was, as I understood her testimony this evening, she has not yet designed the interior fit-out of those additional phases, just only the first phase has been done. Is that correct?
We have programmed, which means that we've designated some spaces, but we don't know this precise detail of exactly what those spaces will be until later phases.
It
I
hasn't
would like
been
to
designed.
remind, if I may, I'd like to just remind the board, our application seeks preliminary approval for the entire project and final approval for phase 1.
Right, so, other than phase 1, the final architectural plans have not been done, and there's no plan submitted to the board showing what that layout would be. That's correct? Is that right?
Showing what the final layout,
No, we know what the
Oh,
buildings
yeah,
are going to look
correct,
like, we don't know
correct.
what the interiors are going to be, right?
correct.
But don't I have a right to know on these further plans what the size of the cafeteria will be, what facilities will be provided there? Isn't that part of what this entire project is about? The applicant's not coming before you and saying, I'm only going to build this first phase, put 400 students in it and not have any of these other amenities, such as perhaps a library, a cafeteria, and things such as that?
Well, I certainly would say you do, so if you want to ask those questions, please do.
Well, what's going to happen if, in fact, those other phases are never constructed? Will the building then just function as a one-building facility with everybody bringing boxed lunches?
Yes.
Now, you indicated that in this first phase, it's built to accommodate 400 students, and that has been accomplished while you're allocating 20 square feet per student in the classrooms, right?
Yes.
When you build out, and what is the total square footage of that first phase? If you know.
The total square footage of the first phase of both buildings is 64,620 square feet.
And what's the total build out for the entire facility?
All of the buildings,
Yeah.
147,400 square feet.
And of that 64,200 square feet, what percentile of that is occupied by the gymnasium?
Approximately 1/3.
For classroom space alone then, would it be fair to say that the classroom space would be roughly 40,000 square feet?
Roughly, yes.
If you have 40,000 square feet and 400 students, what does that come out to per square feet, foot per student?
10,000. 10,000.
Per student? That's for this one minute.
I'm sorry, I didn't bring a calculator tonight to do math, so I apologize. The question is 100, right?
Now, going further, with regard to, is it your testimony that this building was designed so that if no other construction took place for that additional 80,000 square feet, it would still be able to function as a high school?
Correct.
Now, in your design of this building, what information, if any, were you given by the members of the building committee with regard to the curriculum of this facility, the courses being taught, any of that information? Was any of that provided to you in your design process?
Yes.
What was given to you?
I was advised that they would like 4 general classrooms per grade, and the quantity of science classrooms that was desirable, and that we needed to provide some flexible spaces within the building so that they could accommodate a large group, if need be, within the academic building.
How about the design of laboratories and scientific facilities and the like? Have you done that?
Yes.
Is that shown on this plan?
Furniture is not shown on this plan for that, but the rooms are allocated there,
It
yes.
says science lab and classroom, science lab and classroom. Have the interiors of those rooms been designed as far as workstations, any type of computer devices and or the like? Has any of that been done?
Much like the other aspects of the interior building, they are not completed yet.
Okay. With regard to the classrooms in question, I'm looking at the 550 square feet.
You'll find it's not my fault.
Oh, I gotta check that.
looking at the classrooms themselves, there's no reflection here of cloak rooms or storage rooms or closets or anything like that. Has that been designed yet?
There are storage rooms.
Are they shown in the classrooms? Are there any?
They're not in the classrooms.
No
They're-
closets?
I'll explain.
Okay.
These are lockers, these are lockers, these are lockers for students all along the corridor.
Those are in the hall.
In the corridor, yes. They're high school students, they don't take their coats into the classrooms. This is a storage area on the first floor, excuse me, on the second floor. This is a storage area on the first floor. There are cloaks and closets in administrative areas. There has been storage areas allocated within the classrooms as well. Not shown on every single room because it's duplicate in most of the
How
rooms.
about general storage areas for keeping your janitorial supplies?
That's what these storage areas are that I just explained to you.
Where is that? In between these rooms here?
Yes.
How many employees do you anticipate within the building necessary to perform general maintenance facility work?
So are you asking about maintenance or are you asking about,
Maintenance.
I don't know. I don't know what their maintenance plan is.
Is there a workshop for the maintenance workers present on your plant?
No.
With regard to, for example, maintenance as far as the grounds themselves, is there a provision in this plan for things such as tractors and fertilizers and all the other things will be stored?
I would imagine that given that there's not, they have other provisions anticipated. I don't know what their plans are.
You know, and they're not shown on the plans.
No, not on the architectural plans, no.
Okay. Just a quick question with regard to the cafeteria. And you indicated, of course, that people will be bringing bag lunches. Is there any provisions in there for example, sinks for cleaning up, refrigerators for storing food, and things of that nature?
Those will be planned for in the building, yes.
But they're not shown on your plans?
Not on this version of this plan.
All right, I just have a couple more questions. In the, is the gymnasium a part of the first phase?
Excuse me?
Is the gymnasium a part of the first phase?
Yes,
Does the gymnasium also include a swimming pool? Is that part of that first plan?
that is not part of the first phase.
Okay. Can you show me the area on your plans where the gymnasium is located?
This area with the gray is the gymnasium. This is the gym, this is a stage area, this is a warming area for
This is food preparation.
food prep. It's a warming kitchen so that if you do need cafeteria functions, they can have microwaves and things like that for the students to warm their lunch.
So when you say there's two, how about with regard to the locker facilities in this gymnasium?
There are 2 locker rooms.
How many lockers are there provided for?
I believe 60 per locker room.
It's 120 lockers per 400 students. Okay. Now, with regard to the warming room for food preparation, what is this? It's 1,000 square feet. Will that include refrigerators and stoves and things such as that? And is your testimony really that the gymnasium itself is going to serve as a cafeteria?
Yes.
All right.
Once the student body reaches a large enough population that it needs to eat there, yes.
I think you said that. Okay. So in other words, the maximum number of students who can utilize the first phase is 400 students, but you're not anticipating having 400 students right off the get-go.
Correct.
All right. And as the student body grows, you're then going to utilize the gymnasium as the cafeteria?
Yes.
Okay. And then there you'll be, I take it, preparing food, not just bringing box lunches?
It's a warming kitchen, which means we won't be preparing food, it'll be warmed there.
Do you know whether or not it's intended for this gymnasium to be utilized for activities other than just simply the intramural activities of girls exercising during the normal course of their school day?
The gymnasium,
In other words, I'm looking,
I always lose you by the end of the question, that's the problem. I know, okay, continue, go ahead. So, the gymnasium will be used for the students.
okay. Now, I noticed there's a relatively, what appear to be, a limited feature area.
Yes.
Right? Is it anticipated that the gymnasium will also be utilized to host, for example, varsity basketball games with other schools?
Sure, why not?
I don't know why not. How about hosting, I'm not a girl, so I don't know what girls do when they play varsity basketball.
Volleyball.
How about with regard to other affairs such as music concerts and things of that nature?
Sure,
It'll be used for that as well?
yes,
Okay, that's why there's a stage.
correct.
Okay, so one of the now, we say that it can be utilized for things such as concerts and the like. Will that be limited to solely performances put on by the student body, or will there also be?
I have to object, I didn't hear anybody say that it's being used for concerts. And what do you mean by concerts?
She just said it.
Student concerts, within the school, within the academia, that's fine, yes. Student concerts, student performances, any kind of student activity is going to happen here.
How about entertainers coming from outside the school
No.
and performing?
No.
You don't know that for a fact, then, do you? Did you ever discuss that with anybody in the school?
Did I ever discuss what?
Whether or not they would be utilizing this gymnasium for holding of concerts for outside groups to come in and to utilize this facility?
I'm not in charge of any of those decisions.
I think I'm all through. Let me just take a quick look.
Before I had a chance to look through the January transcript. It's somewhat ambiguous at the end as to whether or not there were more people in January who wanted to ask questions of Ms. Mason. You can read it one way, you can read it another way. So, and just out of caution, if there's any cross-examination remaining from the public of Ms. Maisler, she's here. If he has any questions, this would be an appropriate. If there are none, then she's free to go.
So basically, in fact, members of the public who might otherwise have questions are able to do so this time.
Yeah, it's a little unclear. It's, you know, if you were here, I think my notes reflect we were done, but it's kind of like, there's references like I see one more hand, or is there anybody in? We didn't really wrap it up. So she's here. If there are people who have questions about her testimony, we might as well give everybody another opportunity.
We're not going to let the same questions from the same people redo it. We're going to do something different, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there were a number of people who got up and asked her questions.
Question here is, does anyone else from the public that did not ask questions of this witness in the past have a question or questions for this witness? I see an awful lot of hands. Is everybody pointing at this too?
Just, can you identify yourself for the record?
Sure.
Jeffrey Yakovitz, 3 Bohemian Drive.
And
Y-A-C-H-M-E-T-Z.
Mr. Yakovitz, you were sworn last time, just in case we adverse the testimony.
Ms. Maisler, previously Mr. DeCina testified that he did not know what the ambient sound levels of the site were, nor did he take any field measurements to assess the existing sound levels. Do you know what the existing sound levels are at the site?
That was not my testimony, so I can't answer that question for you.
So that's, no.
The answer is no, but I can't help you, I'm sorry.
Do you know what the distance from the center line of the track to the Chapel Hill Road property line is?
It's a site question.
You previously testified, Mr. Kozarowski, that you designed several secondary schools somewhere in the neighborhood of Huntington.
The two that I mentioned, and then there are several besides that that were additions or renovations to schools.
Okay. So based on your vast amount of experience, can you venture a guess as to what the maximum average daily sound levels would be created by a secondary institution of this type?
I don't know how to even begin to guess that.
Okay. Has an acoustical consultant been retained for this project?
No.
So, Township Ordinance 16-258 requires that sound does not exceed 50 decibels at any location outside of the lot on which the use or the source of the sound is located. You previously gave testimony that the mechanical equipment for the first building alone will produce sound levels at 37.286 decibels. So how will the mechanical equipment for the future buildings be handled?
That was not my testimony.
Okay, my apologies. The buildings that are being proposed at this site, are any of them being designed with basements or crawl spaces?
The academic building has a basement,
And how deep is that?
8 feet below the finished floor.
Okay. Mr. DeCina previously testified that the water table across the site is generally 1 to 4 feet below the existing grade. Have you specified a structural slab designed to resist the pressure of the water table, or have you specified a non-structural slab with a permanent underdrain system?
We have designed the building based upon the geotechnical recommendations.
And what was that?
Do you want geotechnical recommendations at this
Well, as the
time?
architect of record.
Well, the geotechnical recommendations were that the basement would not go any deeper than 8 feet below grade
Okay, so,
because of the spot geotechnical boring elevation at that location of where the basement was.
okay. So based on Mr. DeCina's testimony,
Yeah, I have to object here. Based on Mr. DeCina's testimony means that should have been questioned to Mr. DeCina.
no, I understand that. I'm
Well, then, form your,
simply stating.
if I may ask, if you form your questions directly to Ms. Maisler, it would make it much easier for her to answer you.
Okay. You testified that the bottom of the basement is 8 feet below surface grade,
Correct.
which is 4 feet below the bottom of the measured or identified water table.
Mr. DeCina's testimony was that it was 2 feet below grade
One
across the site, correct?
1 to 4 feet below existing grade generally across the site, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't argue with what Mr. DeCina testified.
I'm just trying to understand.
Can I make, I sort of interrupt, I'm sorry. There was a public hearing that night in January 22nd. Ms. Mason was here. You had the opportunity to ask questions that night. You asked questions of some of the, Mr. DeCina. She was available. No one's trying to, to make this cut you off, but to become argumentative when the board is giving you an opportunity to ask questions of her. When frankly, we probably don't have to, because the people who asked questions that night, their rights probably ended that night. So if you have a couple questions, okay, but you want her to agree with your general hypothesis, and she's not doing it, and we're getting to an argument.
Well, I apologize. I didn't think I was getting argumentative. I'm just trying to understand how they're going to handle the groundwater situation.
Okay, she's the architect.
Right, and as the architect of record, she has overall design control of the structural slab.
Okay.
Can you, given the fact that you had the opportunity to ask these questions in January, and given the fact that the board is trying to accommodate everybody, and could you keep your questions to the point where, this is becoming argumentative. So if you have questions of her, please ask them, and then let somebody, if there's anybody else on the architectural stuff who didn't get an opportunity last time to ask those questions, it's now.
Okay, understood. I only have one final question. So will the buildings have full sprinkler coverage and include a full fire alarm system?
Yes,
And will both those systems be monitored by the Middletown Fire Department and EMS?
I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
Everyone else out there? In the back. Yeah, this.
Sir, you don't look familiar, so I assume that you didn't testify before?
That is correct.
Okay, your name and address, please.
Derek Donahue, 631 Kings Highway East.
Could you please raise your right hand? Swear testimony about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Recognizing this is for questions
Yes.
of Ms. Mason.
Who is the architect?
Mark.
You know that you are the architect and have designed all of this. Do you know what size of the structural beams or structural building materials will be required to be brought in for these two buildings in the initial phase?
I know the height
Do you
and
know
the
the
depth.
weight?
I don't know the weight, no.
What would be the height and the depth?
The depth of the beams that are coming in are probably W18s in that neighborhood, the vast majority.
And how many of those would be required?
I couldn't tell you.
So to bring in the construction materials required for this, what site improvements would be needed to get them to buildings?
The site improvements that are proposed in phase one.
And they would be sufficient to hold the weight of both the construction trucks bringing the material as well as those materials on site?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, roads are designed to carry these things, so
I only asked, as a Middletown homeowner who just did a construction project, I had issues with this at a residential project. That's why I'm asking you if you've looked into this in a commercial project. Have you looked into the weight of the materials required to be brought in and the accompanying?
I have not, no.
To your knowledge, has anyone on your design team looked into that?
I don't know.
No, thank you. And a couple more questions, similar architectural, but different object. Given the design of the buildings that we have here so far, and knowing that it's going into a undeveloped area, in the design and in the plans, have there been any provisions for what I'll call wildlife maintenance/containment?
That's not an architectural question.
My architect, when I went to the town, had...
I object now to this, to your opportunity to ask questions.
Testimony that has nothing to do with this application. You're asking a question that's not architectural. Do you have another question?
She didn't testify to anything about that.
I understand that you're building a school where people will be bringing in food. You're building it on a undeveloped place. What provisions in the design of this property and these two buildings have or have not been considered for what I'll call vermin maintenance?
Okay. Are you asking whether there'll be an extermination program to maintain the buildings?
Before the site is built and excavated, are there any provisions for, yes, containing them?
I don't know that that's an architectural question.
You know, yeah.
I don't have an answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Board.
Anyone else?
Spoke to listen.
WOBITO. About 333 Chapel Road.
Please raise your right hand, swear testimony best gives the words to the cultures and witnesses to God. Thank you. Again, this is for questions for the architect. And you were not here before.
I have one question. The applicant is looking for preliminary approval for phase 2, as well as final.
I'll answer that. Applicant is seeking preliminary approval for the entire campus.
So my sole question
Do you
is...
have a question? That's your first question.
First question.
Do you have more than one question?
Second question. What, with the phase 2, you also mentioned there would be potentially some additional classrooms that you might as well go. The absolute maximum, what would be the absolute maximum number of students that would go to the school based on the total build-out? The absolute maximum.
The absolute maximum would be 500.
Only 100 more than...
Correct.
That's a good question.
Thought there was another hand.
This is Kennedy.
You don't mind your name and address, please?
Yes, 305 Chapel Hill Road, Mine Cleary.
Sorry, last name?
Mine Cleary, C-L-E-A-R-Y.
Mine, I believe that you were here in January.
I didn't know the process, which I think is probably a part of it.
So recognizing that you were here in January and you could have asked questions that night, so could you just ask, if you could keep it
Sure.
brief?
Because I see some of mine were even for the site plan, which I didn't realize that you couldn't get up again either. Because it's the first time we've been going through this kind of thing, which I think a lot of people are, so.
What was it? You have an opportunity, just keep it to the point.
Okay. Sure, my MAI. Okay, and I don't know if this is a question for you, but is the architect involved in choosing where the driveway to the whole thing goes?
No, not,
Not at all. Okay, just to get right to that, exactly. Also, about the number of acres of trees that are being cut down, does that have anything to do with your plans, or are you just strictly on the interior of the
building.
Okay. Okay. So that, just about, your set of plans, there's the first set of plans you submitted, there was a certain amount of lot coverage, and then subsequently parking lots were added that expanded the lot coverage and the impervious surfaces, and also the impervious surface of the widening of the road. Is that all included in that plan?
That's all site plan. That's not
But lot
architecture.
coverage is not part of the...
The only part of coverage that is our realm is the building coverage.
In the parking lot?
That's,
Is there a
That's-
number?
that's civil engineering, not architecture.
As an architect, do you know the number where you would have to go for a variance if you take a certain amount of lot coverage?
Yes,
Is there a square footage?
Yes.
there is.
Can you tell me what that is and what we're at?
That's really a question for the engineer, but it's online.
It's on the plan.
We're not seeking any variances. We are well under the coverage requirement.
But even if you add parking lots and...
Correct.
You're still...
The application seeks no variance.
Okay, why is the project being built in phases?
Yes, you want?
I think we could all stipulate its cost and just
Time,
time
cost.
and the number of students.
Number of
So
students.
what is the anticipated amount of time between phase 1 and phase 2?
The reason,
No.
if you don't mind, phase 1 is designed to build all of the infrastructure so that the campus, heavy construction, so to speak, is completed. The remaining phases have to do with the expansion of or addition, construction of the additional building. The time frame that's granted under the municipal land use law can be up to 5 years for preliminary approval and an additional 5 years for final if we necessary to seek all of the extensions.
Okay, so in phase one, did you do everything necessary for the whole thing?
Again, this was the testimony of, first of all, the civil engineer in January, the extensive cross-examination in our last meeting where the entire 3.5 hours we're asking questions of our engineer. So the answer is, that was already testified to, and yes, we want to build the infrastructure of the design. It was in the public notice that everyone got.
I'm sorry. I'm not an expert. I'm trying to figure some few things out. So if you build all the parking lots and all the drainage and everything in the first stage, and you don't get enough students to come, then you have more parking lots and more drainage and more everything than actually is needed. Have you had any discussions with your clients that maybe this wouldn't be very good for the environment? No, to have all that built and then just be there at already. Do you feel safe with your building plans when no soils borings were done since 2006? Do you feel safe relying on an environmental engineer report when you were at the last meeting? He had a fair amount of uncertainty as whether he even prepared. Excuse me, do you feel safe with your plan?
Yes.
If you weren't sure, if your environmental engineer wasn't even sure if he wrote the report?
Yes.
Was there one more? Yes, sir.
Your name and address, sir?
John Cleary, C, 305 Chapel Hill Road.
And I think you had the opportunity in January as well? Yeah, so could you keep it to the point of the architectural issues?
Absolutely, yes. The first question I had is that prior meeting you mentioned that there would be a restriction on outdoor lighting and outdoor speaker systems for athletic events. So their designs are consistent with that, or are there
Yes.
that have been added or something? So their design, it sounds like they're designed intramural, athletic events as opposed to hosting other school events, because scoreboards and compliance with
Correct.
outdoor speaker system. So they're just for intramural activities, is that fair?
Yes.
Can you repeat that?
I mean, I think she answered the question,
Okay.
but I don't think that's consistent with her prior testimony.
And I'm not sure that question, I didn't follow it. If you could say it again.
Yeah.
In the mic. What is rephrase the question? Is there going to be...
Maybe I could answer it this way.
Is there going to be...
There's going to be intramural and interscholastic.
Yeah. Is there going to be interscholastic sports?
Yes.
So how is that design of that going to accommodate interscholastic sports when in earlier meetings, your design going to accommodate interscholastic sports? When in earlier meetings, it was said that there was some restriction on outdoor lighting, so I guess it was only day activities. I understand that. Unless you have portable lighting coming in, which I don't know the answer to that.
No.
Or
Let me interrupt you here. I'd like to put it very clearly for you, Mr. Cleary, and for the board, that we have said there will not be outdoor lighting. There will be lighting inside the building.
And I understand.
All right. Can we cut through this? This is what they said before. No outdoor lighting, no outdoor loudspeakers, and no outdoor billboards. I mean, the scoreboards.
Correct.
But there will be interscholastic events, and you've not...
I think that would be normal and customary. And I think they testified to that at various points, and I think the architect misspoke. So
Yes.
Okay, I was just curious how the design could accommodate that without interscholastic events, without that facility. Is there some design feature you built in that would make up for the fact that there's not going to be any electronic, loud, either speaker? I mean, how are you going to put a score, basically?
But this is beyond the architectural.
No, I'm
I'm confused by this question because places like Middletown South do this all the time. Interscholastic activities, sporting events, no lighting, no loudspeakers, no scoreboards.
Okay, all right.
And that's what they're saying, that they're going to have.
So most of the high school guys in high school. So.
But they're not playing football.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Not yet?
The next question I have is on the buildings themselves, was designed, and have they been designed, the HVAC system and such, that they would accommodate or anticipate at least summer activities happening at the school, whether there's summer camps or summer school throughout the summer? Is there enough air conditioning, for example, to accommodate, to have the flexibility for them to operate the entire summer as well?
Yes. That doesn't necessarily mean they will. It just
But it's
means,
designed to
it's,
flexibility to
yes,
accommodate that.
correct, correct.
And what is the seating capacity of the gym and the theater? Roughly.
The bleachers hold approximately 300. And if we were to put chairs in rows for, say, a graduation ceremony, approximately 700.
And the theater?
That would be, oh, you're talking about the Performing Arts
Yeah.
Building in the future phase? That one does not, that's, okay, that would be way less than 700.
Okay.
700 is like max, like
Gotcha.
pushed in for a graduation ceremony, but 600 would be the max for the auditorium that's in a future phase.
I'm sorry, what?
600.
600. Okay. And are there any other, and I don't know how that size compares to other theaters around, or whether that means will be restricted only to student use, or whether the size would permit, outside groups to lease that or something, or whether there's other amenities you've designed in, like ticket booths or something like that, that would lend themselves to easily release that kind of space out.
I don't have that knowledge. The reason the theater was designed to about 600 was so that if they want to have a graduation ceremony and invite, two parents and maybe a brother or sister, they'd be able to see them.
And the final question I have is, it was mentioned earlier that maximum occupancy, student occupancy was anticipated to be 500. And the design of the buildings, they've been designed to accommodate 500, or suppose you're more successful than you anticipate you're going to be, there's 550. Are they designed to have some flexibility to accommodate a greater number of students?
The school has explained to us that they would like to have a 400 student body. And on occasion, that may be more than 100 per class. Okay, so that 500 number is the absolute maximum student body that it would be, because they don't want a larger class size than that.
So the buildings, as you've designed them, could really safely accommodate, or be able to go over whatever the term of art would be, more than 500 students. Is that fair?
Sure, yes.
All right, that's all I have.
Your name and address, sir.
Valencia, 3 Arrowhead Court.
And were you here in January?
I was not.
Please raise your right hand. Swear testimony about the give the board truth, the whole truth, and the truth to be God.
I do. Valencia, V as in Victor, A-L-E-N-C-I-A. I guess my first question is, are you in charge of decisions regarding construction of sidewalks? Is that part of the design?
Can I just make a general statement? This is partly my fault. I'm trying to make sure that we give everybody every opportunity to ask every question. But most of the questions that are being asked are not architectural.
And they've already been asked and answered.
So a lot of these have been site design issues or other issues, so we have to keep it to the architect.
Okay, is it limited to the architecture of the buildings or the site?
The testimony that was presented by Ms. Maisler in January is the subject of the cross-examination.
Okay. So did you design the entire site where the buildings are?
That's been asked and answered 3 times tonight.
She's the architect. So if you have questions about the buildings themselves, that's what she did. She didn't put them on the property. She didn't say where they went. She didn't build the driveway, the sidewalks, the trees, cutting down. She doesn't know anything about
So
it.
the placement of the buildings is not?
Not her, not her.
Well, that was my question.
What else?
Mr. Chairman, both of our other witnesses, Mr. Katriniak and Mr. Aldericio, are here and available. Mr. Chairman, I also want to make sure that we're all clear that Ms. Maisler is done. Thank you. Good luck.
Kevin Gidding, trying to remember what we did in January without reading transcripts is becoming more difficult as time passes. As to your second,
In our sequence of witnesses, the next witness would have been Mr. Katriniak.
yeah, but the architect, the other
Mr.
architect,
Aldericio did not appear in January. He came in February to testify about a number of items related to the HVAC issues.
and he was here and available in March as well.
Correct.
Do you have any, Mr. Gazarovski, do you have questions of that? Of that? Don't you think he'd be shorter than Mr. Katrina? You want to have him come up?
If you would just to assist me in examining the copy of the site plan.
Could you spell your name again?
Richard Aldericio, A-L-D-E-R-I-S-O.
Mr. Aldericio was here in February. He gave testimony concerning the HVAC units on the building, and he's being cross-examined now by Mr. Taylor. You remain under oath.
My only question is, can I get the site plan? This is the building section. I want to get the overall site plan that shows the location of the buildings relative to the surrounding area.
Can we get that for him?
Fine, you have the overall site plan.
Just for the record, does that have a mark on it as to what exhibit it is? Black, do you see it?
See.
A3.
Okay, that's right there. Thank you. Okay, just so I can orient myself, Mr. Aldericio, you were present when your earlier architect testified, correct?
Yes,
And I take it you were associated with the same design group?
correct.
And the nature of your expertise has to do with the installation of the HVAC systems?
That's not my expertise. HVAC, I'm not a mechanical engineer, but I'm overseeing some of our consultants' work.
Okay. Would it be fair to say, though, that you were responsible for laying out the, number one, determining what the tonnage would necessarily be to air condition this building as well as heat it, and where the various compressors and the like would be located?
I didn't design the units and specify the tonnage. That was calculated by our mechanical engineer. As they propose locations for the equipment, we either approve or make recommendations for locating in certain areas.
Okay. My understanding is at present, the only buildings being constructed would be a certain phase of the administrative building and then a certain phase of the gymnasium, correct?
Correct.
Now, can you tell me where all of the compressors for those buildings will be located? Will be located on rooftops, at ground level, or will they be in the interior?
Rooftops for compressors and interior for some of the other equipment, such as exhaust fans and the like.
Okay. Now, looking first at the administrative building, is it correct that the entire administrative building will not be constructed at once, just one portion of it will be constructed?
Correct.
And if you just would draw your attention to that building, I don't see, yeah, there's a north arrow on this. Would it be fair, is it the easterly most portion of the building will be constructed, or the westerly most portion of the building?
The easterly.
Okay. And I take it that the gymnasium is located in the most northerly end of the building itself, of the site.
It would be the southerly piece is the gymnasium.
Southerly piece of the gymnasium.
Correct.
Now, do you know what the distances of those buildings where the compressors are located to the nearest residential property line?
Yes.
What is it?
For the Phase 1 portion of the academic building,
Right.
it's approximately 410 feet
Right.
from the southerly property line. That's the nearest property line to that building.
Okay, now, having said that, have you made any determination with degree of expertise in your area whether the sounds coming from that would have any impact upon the surrounding residential properties, as far as the dBAs coming from the units?
We determined that
Well, I object with the word impact. Are you speaking about meeting the requirements of the standards, Mr. Gadras, or you're saying there'll be anything at all?
I asked him what the dBAs would be.
All right, okay.
And if he's being called as an expert with the installation of the...
It has nothing to do with an expert.
That's finish, please.
Yeah, but at least get on point, because I'm talking about the question.
I don't need to be lectured by Mr. John.
No, that's focus on some question.
If he has an objection, let him direct it to the chair, and the chair can make a ruling.
My objection is that if they're going to be put in the form of a question, it should be in the question we can all understand.
Well, perhaps you don't understand.
I don't. Nor does the witness.
You haven't given him a chance to answer. Mr. Alderiso, can you tell me, with regard to the proposed administrative buildings, approximately how many compressors will be located upon the rooftop of that building?
for the Phase 1 portion
For
of
Phase 1 portion.
the academic building, we have one air-cooled chiller on the roof.
That's it?
Yes.
How about with regard to the second phase?
We haven't designed a mechanical system for...
You have not designed it? Okay, but having said that, you understand that with regard to this second phase, the applicant is before this board seeking preliminary approval, do you not? You understand that, don't you?
Yeah, we've got to meet the requirements of the ordinance, we understand that.
But you have not yet designed the heating and air conditioning with regard to that second phase of the project?
Correct.
Okay. Now, do you know what the distance would be of the closest portion of that building would be to the nearest residential property line?
I don't know exactly.
You have to guess, or you just... It's closer than the first phase, is it not?
It's closer than the first,
The first phase, you said, was approximately 400 feet.
410 feet.
Okay, would it be fair to say then that perhaps with regard to the second phase, somewhere between 150 to 200 is to the closest building line, to the residential line?
Probably a safe estimate.
Okay. Did you make any attempt at all to determine what the, you know what DBAs are, do you not?
Yes.
And you're familiar with the nomenclature with regard to noise and how you measure noise and the like, correct?
Yes.
Have you made any determination as to what the DBAs would be at the property line when both of these buildings are operating?
No, I don't. Again, this mechanical system for the second has not been designed. I just know they've got to be 50 or less.
Pardon me?
The sound pressure has got to be 50 or less at the property line. It has to be.
In the evening hours?
Anytime.
Okay. Now, having said that, have you made a determination as to what they would be as to the building in the first place?
Based on the unit running full power.
Yes.
Okay. And again, we haven't taken into account any screens or any buffers or landscaping or anything. We we've calculated that, I think the level is about 37 decibels.
Where are those calculations at?
They were submitted.
This comes to the board?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, just a couple of final questions. Am I correct in assuming that with regard to the first phase, have a full set of architectural plans been presented to this board showing the complete design of the HVAC system?
No, they have not.
Do you know when that will take place?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Do you know when that will happen?
When the final plans will be submitted to the
Right.
board?
Right.
We'd be submitting final plans to the building department.
Okay. Do you know, are those plans completed as of this date?
Could you repeat that also?
Yeah, are those plans for that first phase been completed as of this date?
No, they have not.
Okay. Now, with regard to the second phase, and I know that I asked questions of the first architect, I mean, other than showing the footprint and that layout perhaps of the first floor, has there been any completed designs with regard to the interior architectural layouts of the remaining phases to this project?
Only schematically.
Just if you would explain to me what schematic means.
Basic square footages, basic configurations of spaces, adjacencies.
Okay, now, I take it you've testified many times before planning boards and or boards of adjustment, have you not?
Several times, yes.
Okay. Are you of the opinion that what you have completed with regard to the second phase would satisfy the requirements for reports such as this granting preliminary approval for that site?
Yes.
Based upon what?
Based, again, upon sizes of spaces, adjacencies, space types, stacking.
Now, you refer to staffing.
Not stacking, stacking.
Stacking?
Stacking of space.
Do you have any knowledge, whatever, of the manner in which this facility will operate as a school?
No.
I will.
I think he's got a short
Use your name for the record, please.
Jeffrey Yachmetz, Y-A-C-H-M-E-T-Z. I promise, Mr. Gorman, I have not questioned this witness. Mr. Alderisi, I've asked the question of the previous architect, but it may have been inappropriate. Has an acoustical consultant been retained for this project?
Not yet.
And why has that not happened?
We typically use our acoustical consultants for performing arts center design, music rooms, things of that nature.
So no exterior acoustical measurements or design or investigation has been conducted at this time?
No, sir.
So how can you, with 100% certainty, certify that the design set forth to this board will not exceed the township ordinance, given that the cooling tower itself is 37 decibels?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
I'm just asking, make it simpler. How can you be 100% certain plan that has been submitted to this board will not exceed the township ordinance. Since there's no acoustical consultant retained, no exterior measurements have been taken, given that the cooling tower itself will show 37 decibels.
The 37 falls below the requirement for 50. That calculation was a pretty simple one. Typically, we're challenged with what you're asking when we do buildings, and we do buildings that are 50 feet from property lines, 25 feet from property lines, 100. In this case, we are 400 feet, 900 feet, 890 feet to the north, 430 feet to the west. It's not as challenging as one might think, especially given the fact that each building is relatively small.
So, based on what you're saying, besides the sound generated by the cooling tower, this site will be completely silent.
I didn't hear anybody say completely silent.
Actually, so I asked, go back to my initial question, how can you be certain that this site will not exceed the township ordinance given that the cooling tower itself is registering 37 decibels?
Further object, does the ordinance require that it be zero sound, or they acknowledge that we might make some sounds, and there's a 50 dB standard at each property during the nighttime hours, and 65 dB at the property line during the daytime working hours?
Mr. Joko,
Is that what you're talking about?
I do not disagree with you one
It's a
iota.
formal question that Mr. Alvarez can answer.
Please tell me how you can ensure that this site will not exceed 50 decibels, given that the cooling tower is generating 37 decibels.
Just clarification, we're not using any cooling towers on the project. That's it. That building is an air-cooled chiller.
Air-cooled chiller, my apologies.
It's okay. Any equipment that we locate on any of these structures that poses a challenge with regard to the 50 decibels would be buffered with acoustical screening.
Okay.
So we would run the same calculation for every piece of equipment once it's designed, make sure it's at 50 or less at the property line, and go from there.
But that has not been done at this point.
We haven't designed equipment for all the other phases of the building.
So you don't know for sure.
We don't know for sure what the size and the sound level of the other pieces of equipment are, but we do know for sure that if they exceed the 50 at the line, we will, again, add the buffers, add the acoustical screens. We've got to be, to get a variance-free application, you've got to be at 50 or less. Don't have a choice.
No further questions?
Yes, sitting all the way in the back, so putting some reference points for fire.
Lee Buckney, 37 Savoll Road.
Listening input. Were you previously sworn? So you're made under oath in case you slip into testimony. These are questions that you were previously sworn.
Thank you. My question for you is, what type-
Mike, please.
Excuse me?
Speaking to Mike.
What type of electric will that cooling device on the roof require?
I don't know.
Is that single phase or is that three phase, sir?
I don't know.
Can you tell us? Who can tell us if you're not the one? Since you're supposed to be the expert on this and you specified it. Is that correct?
No, I'm not the expert on the cooling tower, I didn't specify it.
So who amongst your team will you address that question to?
Our electrical engineer would be handling the electric, our mechanical engineer designed and specified the unit.
Is he scheduled on this throughout later on?
I think, they don't have to, this is not an architectural board. This is not the building department. So they submit that when they apply for their building plans. We require architectural drawings as part of the site plan review. But it doesn't have to have every detail within it. That's a building decision.
I'm not asking for every detail, I'm just asking whether or not the electric going through this building will be single phase.
I don't mean to argue, sir, but, I tried to explain what this board does.
Well, I'll answer that. If there's three-phase available, I'll answer the question, three-phase, because it's less costly. Single-phase, less than single-phase, and perhaps have converters. But it'll be an electrical plant, just like for your house. Coming off of the source, you have to determine what was available and make the best of it. JCP&L is the provider, and we'll have to, we have to budget our clients, when we get approvals, we'll have to get the JCP&L plans to be in order. They're presented to the building department issues a permit if they have approval, and then they get built.
That's a good building plan.
Correct.
Yes. In the middle.
Just identify yourself so we can...
Yeah, my theory, this is actually the person I really am concerned to talk to. We have an autistic son, and we probably lived 150 feet, very close. And sound is a huge issue for him. So is there any way that you can make, what does 37 decibels sound like? I have no idea what that is, but I am concerned about the noise and the activity for him. We may have to move it if it's too much, so. Do you have any idea what that sounds like?
The nearest building to Chapel Hill Road is 918 feet from the property line there, for starters. So the decibel drop-off from that building to Chapel Hill Road, the cars driving by will be louder than any equipment you hear.
Yeah, and then does the noise take and affect the number of cars, and the trees are going to be cut down, like in that same area? Like our buffer is going to be cut down, and there's going to be more cars. And his room is on that side of the building, and we're being put much closer to a lot of noise. Now, he can hear these 3 minutes before we can hear. So he is very sensitive to sound. Is there something you guys can do to make it even less with people who are that close? And I don't know what 37 decibels sounds like. But
It won't be 37 at that property line. You're on the Chapel Hill Road side? Yeah, it won't be 30, it'll be... That's the greatest distance between buildings and property line are,
Okay, I just thought it would be important for the applicant to know that. Because, he's lived there for 25 years, and if it's too much,
It's 37 is not,
it's not that bad.
it's,
Is it like a lawn
Well,
mower?
it's not only not that loud, what I'm saying is, it's 900 feet.
Yeah.
That sound dissipate before it gets to Chapel Hill Road. So,
probably, right. It's, no, again, the property line where we took the 37 decibel count was 410 feet away.
Oh, yeah, because I couldn't see where it was. Okay, thank you.
anyone else?
Name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Jim Mulvaney, M-U-L-V-A-N-E-Y, I live at 3 Second Drive.
Were you sworn in before all this?
Yes, I was.
Okay, thank you.
I will be very brief. The question is, have you yet applied for an architectural review by the Landmarks Commission? My understanding is that the Landmark Commission requires an architectural review if there's going to be any construction in one of the historic districts in town.
We have not applied for that.
Will that be done? Is that required to be done before approval is considered?
Yeah, to my knowledge, this property is not in a historic district.
Just west of the Chapel Hill Historic District, is that right?
The historic district is on the other side of Chapel Hill Road. It does not include this property. I would double check that, but I don't believe it includes this property.
I just requested that be determined officially, and if it's required that there be an architectural review, that it be done by the Landmarks
That would happen if it were an historic district, and again, since I believe it's not.
So you will be double checking.
I will double check.
Didn't see any other hands. Okay. All right, we are done with this month's.
Mr. Katrina actually pays the bills on Mr. Chairman.
So you understand we're done here?
Yes.
Let's go to, I'm going to do, go.
Yeah, just because you were previously sworn, you're under oath, could you just spell your name for the court reporter so she, I know she has it in her system?
Certainly, it's Katyniak.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Gazarovski.
Trinity, I looked at some of the transcripts, and as the traffic consultant, have you determined what access would be utilized to have the building materials for this site delivered to the site?
The plan was to use the proposed driveway as the access for construction.
I understand that. That would be the on-site access, correct? Now, where is that located on this plan? That which is located where on the site? The children.
That is located on Chapel Hill Road, approximately 300 feet north of Mohican Drive.
Okay. Now, how do they get from where onto Chapel Hill Road to get to the site? Are they coming off of Route 35?
I don't know the specific route that they would take, but the plan would be to take the public road system to get to the site.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that in order to get onto Chapel Hill Road, they're going to have to come off of some type of an arterial road to get onto Chapel Hill Road, right?
Yes.
Now, did you make any determination as to the distance from that arterial road to the ingress and egress on Chapel Hill Road onto the site?
No.
Does it matter, if you can tell me, is it a matter of miles, hundreds of feet, thousands of feet, or what it may be?
It's a few miles.
A few miles. So, no matter how you slice it, if in fact during this construction vehicles, delivery trucks, and or the like will be traveling for several miles on Chapel Hill Road.
Yes.
Okay, now, did you make any attempt to determine the physical condition of Chapel Hill Road in that area where it's going to be traversed by these trucks?
No, we have not.
Okay, now, you can do that as an engineer, can you not?
Sure.
You could take corings, you could determine the depth of the asphalt, the depth of the base, and things of that nature.
Yes.
You did none of that.
No.
Did you make any attempt to determine whether or not, as a result of the bringing of these vehicles onto the site, there'd be any diminution of the quality of Chapel Hill Road?
No.
Right. Do you know, have you ever discussed with your client whether he would be prepared if, in fact, it is determined that as a result of this construction, Chapel Hill Road is significantly denigrated, that he would post a bond to remedy that situation?
Beyond the improvements that we talked about regarding our off-site improvements, no.
So whatever damage is caused over these miles of Chapel Hill Road, if it in fact is caused by your client's construction process, he would assume no responsibility.
I don't know that.
Okay. Now, prior to your testimony, did you familiarize yourself with the master plan of the Township of Middletown?
No.
Did you familiarize yourself with how the Township of Middletown has designated certain roadways, be they local roads, collector roads, arterial roads, semi-arterial roads, secondary arterial roads?
Yes.
Okay. Did you make a determination as to what Chapel Hill Road was?
Yes.
What is it?
Chapel Hill Road is a collector road.
Pardon me?
A collector road.
Collector road. I want to refer you, if I can, to page 32 of the Middletown Master Plan, where it lists roadways. That begins on page 21, but on page 22, it refers to secondary arterial roads. And it then lists secondary arterial roads, and it specifically lists as a secondary arterial road, Chapel Hill Road. It also lists collector roads, and on pages 22 and 23, it lists collector roads, and Chapel Hill Road is not listed as a collector road in the master plan, but rather is identified as a secondary arterial road.
Yes. Secondary arterial roads are, in a broader definition, also considered major collector roads. It's sort of it's a hybrid between collector and arterial.
Let me answer this question. Is there anything in the master plan of the Township of Middletown which identifies Chapel Hill Road as a collector road?
Not in the master plan, no.
Okay. In the master plan of the Township of Middletown, does it identify Chapel Hill Road as a secondary arterial road?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to read to you what it says in the master plan with regard to secondary arterial roads. It says the right-of-way for each county secondary arterial road should be consistent with the desired right-of-way width shown on the Monmouth County Highway Plan prepared by the Monmouth County Planning Board. Now, are you familiar with what the required right-of-way and passageway of secondary arterial roads are in the Monmouth County road system?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Pardon me?
No.
Okay. Now, are you familiar with what the prevailing width is of Chapel Hill Road as it traverses for those several miles?
No.
Well, did you make any attempt during the course of your investigation to determine what that roadway width was?
Only in the vicinity of the site itself.
Pardon me?
Only in the vicinity of the site itself.
Okay. When you say in the vicinity of the site, would that mean only in the areas immediately adjacent to the site?
Yes.
Okay. Would it surprise you if I were to comment that the prevailing width of the road width of Chapel Hill Road is 20 feet in width and in some instances less than that?
Are you describing the area in front of the site or the entire length of Chapel Hill Road?
Entire length of Chapel Hill Road.
I'm not aware of the entire length of Chapel Hill Road, so.
Now, as the traffic consultant, didn't you feel it incumbent upon yourself to totally familiarize yourself with the length of Chapel Hill Road, since that is going to be the primary methodology of ingressing and egressing the site?
Familiar in what sense?
What the width of the roadway is, the number of cars that traverse it, the number of cars at the intersection, things of that nature?
At the site access itself, yes.
Pardon me?
At the site access itself.
At the site access?
Yes.
Only at the site access?
And at the intersection of Kings Highway.
Okay. Is the traffic counts at the intersection of Kings Highway in your report?
Yes.
Okay. Now, are not arterial roads normally in the county of Monmouth having a width of 12 feet in each traveled way?
Yes.
And in the county of Monmouth, would there not be also a requirement that there be a shoulder on that traveled way of approximately 8 feet on each side of the roadway?
You're referring to the Monmouth County standards?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you've got a total of 12 and 12, which is 24, plus 16. It's roughly 40 feet of paved area, correct?
Yes.
Now, on this proposed site, in the area of this particular, well, let's go back a step. On Chapel Hill Road itself, is there any areas where there is a shoulder of 8 to 10 feet?
In the section adjacent to the site, I don't believe it's 8 feet.
How about another area? Well, is it any feet at all?
Yes.
How many?
It's approximately 6 feet. It's
How about in other areas of the Chapel Hill Road?
Again, in the area that I confined, the area confined to the site frontage, it's approximately 6 feet at its widest width.
Okay. Would it be fair to say then that for the most part, your analysis of the site and the traffic conditions relative to it only had to do with that area of Chapel Hill Road immediately adjacent to the site itself?
That's correct.
Bear with me. Now, can you tell me when you retained to prepare testimony as a traffic consultant in this matter? Let me go back a step, okay? Let me ask this question first. Were you called on board to give testimony as a traffic consultant before or after the site itself was designed?
After the site design had been initiated.
Okay. So when you were called on board to provide testimony with regard to this project, the acreage of the project, the square footage of the project, the internal road system of the project, the number of students who would be attending, had already been determined, had it not?
It had been largely fixed, yes.
Now, in that sense then, you were not being called upon as a traffic consultant, since you never consulted with the applicant as to this design of this project, but rather you're being simply called upon as an expert witness to opine as to whether or not it was satisfactory.
I did consult with the applicant once I analyzed the site.
Well, but the site had already been designed, had it not?
Yes.
Now, how long have you been actively practicing in the field as a civil engineer in the state of New Jersey?
Over 20 years.
Okay, and you are involved in many projects where you give testimony as a traffic expert, do you not?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in your mind, would this project fit the definition of what the New Jersey Department of Transportation would call a major project?
Yes.
It's a major project as compared to a minor project. Okay, now, in designing a project, which it was so identified, a traffic consultant would have to take into consideration certain standards which are established by the state of New Jersey, the county of Monmouth, and there's also some national publications which provide advice, are there not?
Yes.
In this particular case, you did none of that because you weren't involved in the design of the project.
No, that's not true.
Well, if you didn't design the project, how could you have provided input into the design if you weren't hired until after it was done?
The site layout was largely completed. However, as part of my analysis, I evaluated the site for conformance with appropriate standards.
You did an analysis.
Yes.
You were not a part of the initial determination as to how many square feet could fit on this site. You were not a part of the original analysis as to how many cars could be serviced on this site coming off of Chapel Hill Road.
No, that was part of the prior application. That was part of the prior application. I was not involved.
Well, you say prior application. The prior application was for, I believe, was it 24 residential homes, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Now, this is a far more intense project, is it not?
And 24 homes?
Pardon?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there are far more cars coming onto this site as is proposed as compared to a 24-unit residential home site that was proposed 10 years ago.
It will generate more traffic.
So all of these determinations with regard to size, student body, number of cars, number of buses, all of that was decided prior to your coming on board.
Yes.
Now, would it be fair to say that when a traffic consultant is called upon to analyze a project such as this, that he must not only give consideration to the traffic, which, for example, is presently on Chapel Hill Road, and the traffic that will be coming onto Chapel Hill Road as a result of this project, but he must also give consideration to other projects located in this area which have been approved.
Yes.
Now, did you do any of that?
I did inquire as to other projects in the area, and there were no major projects that would affect that.
There were none? You know, with due respect to Mr. Katriniak, I would like the audience not to comment as to his responses. I may not agree with his responses, but I've known him for a long time, and he's a good guy, and I'll listen to his responses and disagree with him, but I'd like to just do this in a professional manner.
In other words, he's asked the crowd.
Yeah, I would like the same courtesy from my opposition as to my comments, and we'll proceed in that fashion. Thank you. Are you aware of a project that was formerly before, not this zoning board, but before, not before this board, but before the zoning board, that was commonly known as the Town Center Project?
Yes.
That's an approved project, is it not?
Yes.
Did you take that into consideration in doing your analysis?
Time out. There's no approved Town Center project.
There is.
There's not.
I mean, go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There's not.
Well, what may be presently before the board may not be, or what has presently been submitted may not be approved, but there was in fact a project that was approved as a result of litigation.
No.
It was never approved.
Never.
Are you aware of the fact that there is a contemplated project located at the corner of Kings Highway and Route 35, which encompasses the utilization of thousands of parking spaces on a daily basis?
I'm generally aware of the project, yes.
Well, you practice in Monmouth County, do you not?
Yes, I do.
Matter of fact, I think you were once employed by an engineering firm within this county.
Yes.
And you were aware of what was known as the Town Center Project,
Yes.
weren't you? You were aware of the scope of the project, the size of the project?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to object at this point. There's a focus of the Town Center project related to this application. I think that's what the question. If you want to talk about Town Center, I think you'll get your chance in the next year or so.
Are you aware of the fact that there is located then at that corner a site which is anticipated to be utilized for thousands of chip-generated traffic a day?
I know that there's a site anticipated for development.
Okay.
The specific to that, I don't know.
You did not take that into consideration at all in your analysis?
No.
Is there not any other sites which have been approved, more specifically a residential subdivision site which is located off of Chapel Hill Road? If you're familiar with it, fine. If not, fine again.
No, no.
So it'd be fair to say that with regard to your analysis, you did not take into consideration any future development of the areas immediately surrounding this site?
No.
Okay. Did you do an analysis as to what vacant land was available for development and what it could be utilized for?
No.
Did you have any future traffic projections at all other than for what would be generated from this site?
Yes.
Well, how'd you do that?
We provided a general background growth rate to the existing traffic. So we utilized state statistical data for the roadway to grow the background traffic for background growth.
This was a hypothetical projection based upon an analysis of what the residential growth projections would be for the area.
Yes, it's based on DOT published data.
But nothing specific with regard to the availability of sites in this immediate area.
No.
Now, with regard to your traffic projections, did you make any analysis of other sites of high schools with approximately the same number of students in the surrounding areas?
Analysis in what sense?
As to traffic patterns, ingresses and egresses, number of students driving vehicles, number of buses, service, get that all.
Yes, we took, I took additional counts at another school.
What other schools you got?
CBA.
Pardon me?
CBA?
CVA? How many acres is that site comprised, you know?
I don't know.
Now, CVA is located off of a major arterial roadway, is it not?
Yes.
CVA does not proceed through, trucks or buses going to that site proceeding through highly residential areas, does it?
I don't know.
Well, how could you not know if you did an analysis?
Well, I evaluated the trip generation characteristics of CBA.
Trip generation characteristics?
Yes.
You didn't go out to the site itself and measure those trips?
Yes.
Did you make observations when you were there?
At the site driveway, I measured where traffic was turning in and out of, but I didn't analyze the route in which they took.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Have you made a determination as to exactly how many buses would be coming onto this site?
Yes.
How many per day, for ingresses?
Approximately 12 buses.
12 buses per day? Did you make any analysis of, in that left-hand lane for truck ingresses, whether or not there would be any keying up of buses coming backwards?
Yes, I evaluated the potential queuing at the proposed left turn.
What did you determine?
I determined that we had less than 2 vehicles at peak operation and that we sized the left turn slot to accommodate that queue.
Tell me how you arrived at that figure of 2.
I prepared a level of service analysis for the traffic. I did a gap study along the roadway to determine how many available gaps there were, and I applied the site-generated traffic to the site based on a conservative projection of total volume of drivers to the site versus buses.
Okay, now, in all of these areas, we know, of course, that you were not called in as a consultant to deal with the design of the site, but you were called in after the design to provide testimony, and I take it in order to do that, you had to determine what would be the study period, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, did you do an analyzation of traffic at the intersection of Kings Highway and Chapel Hill Road?
Yes.
And that was submitted to the board?
Yes.
Did an analysis of traffic at the intersection of Chapel Hill and Route 35?
No.
Okay. Can you tell me why not?
Based on the anticipated traffic distribution that was utilized in the model, we didn't feel there was not a substantial volume of traffic at the 35 intersection that would warrant a study.
Well, isn't that intersection, Chapel Hill and Route 35, the next major intersection to the south?
Yes.
Okay. And you've identified this as being a major project, have you not?
Yes.
Yet having done that, doesn't the standards and the criteria of the New Jersey Department of Transportation, as well as AASHTO and others, call for an analysis of any intersections in the area which could possibly interact with traffic?
Which would possibly what?
Interact with traffic, impact traffic.
Impact traffic. There are thresholds, and it's generally described as the 100-trip rule, which would determine which intersections would warrant a study.
Doesn't the New Jersey Department of Transportation and ITE, the International Traffic Engineers, state that all next major intersections must be analyzed?
Not in this circumstance.
Pardon me?
Not in this circumstance.
Well,
This is not a site on a state highway.
Not in this circumstance, because it was you who determined that it was not necessary.
No, this is not a site on a state highway, so that requirement is not applicable.
Highway 35 is state highway, is it not?
Yes?
This is the next available intersection from ingressing and egressing the site, is it not?
This site does not have a direct access to Route 35.
How does the NJDOT and the ITE determine what intersection should be analyzed?
The NJDOT provides a trip threshold if a site were directly accessing a state highway.
Now, did you make a determination of what the trip threshold was?
I made a determination of the trip threshold at the site driveway and the immediate adjacent intersections.
But not at the Chapel Hill and Route 35 intersection?
No.
Did you make any attempt prior to opining as to the traffic issue, to determine the level of number of accidents which occurred on Chapel Hill on a yearly basis?
Yes,
And did you submit those reports to the board?
yes, that's part of my traffic report.
Would you say that the number of accidents are significant?
No,
Pardon?
no.
How many were there?
I don't recall the number off the top of my head, but at the intersections I studied, they were very low.
Didn't ask about did your study limit itself solely to the intersections or the entire travel way of Chapel Hill?
The portion of Chapel Hill Road abutting the site,
So that means not the entire.
not the entire road, no.
That's not good. Okay. So, what, do you agree with me? Would you agree with me that in making your analysis, that you had to take into consideration the information which is provided in the NJDOT handbook as well as the information provided in the ITE?
Which DOT handbook you're referring to?
According to the NJDOT handbook, which is called Managing Transportation in Your Community, a municipal handbook prepared by the NJDOT. You familiar with that?
No.
You're not familiar with it? No. Okay, that gives an analysis of what should be incorporated into a traffic review, such as future traffic projections and the like. Does it not? But if you're not familiar with the book, I guess you can't comment on that.
The title you described, I'm not familiar with.
Did you do an analysis of this project, taking it on a step-by-step basis from when it's first opening with perhaps a limited number of students, tracing it stage by stage until it reaches the full capacity of 500 students?
My analysis focused on the total build-out of the 500 student population.
You done, Mr. Gizera? Okay, anyone from the public?
Just identify.
Jeffrey Yachmitz, Y-A-C-H-M-E-T-Z. Mr. Katriniak, in section 3 of your traffic impact report, You state the traffic study was conducted the week of January 27th. Which exact day was that traffic counted?
It was, I don't recall the exact date, but it was either the Tuesday or Wednesday of that week. I can look it up if you need the exact date, but my report, is there that date?
Take a look, if I may take a look at that date.
Yeah, we counted on more than one day. We took counts at, we took counts at Chapel Hill Mohegan on the 28th of January. Kings Highway we took at a later date. Kings Highway, I don't recall the exact date. We took those counts earlier in February.
Okay, so the traffic counts at Mohegan and Chapel Hill was January 28th,
Yes,
one day.
yes.
Do you know what the standard deviation for 1 day's worth of data is?
Specific, no.
What the variance would be from one single day's worth of data?
I know general parameters, but yes,
Would you,
it's generally 2 to 5%.
5%, and seasonal changes?
In this area, approximately the same.
So basically what you're saying is your entire level of service analysis was based on one single day's worth of traffic counts?
That's a customary standard, yes.
During that traffic counting, what methods, I'm sorry, that's a customary standard?
Yeah.
That's across the board, 1 day's worth of data in all traffic?
That's an industry standard for data collection, yes.
One single day?
What day of the week was it?
So how do you differentiate between different days of the week, different volumes of traffic on one single day?
The typical standard is you count usually between Tuesdays and Thursdays. Mondays and Fridays, you typically get greater variation in traffic patterns. So you compress your week to a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday in your counts.
So you mentioned that there's a variance of 2 to 5%. Did you increase your numbers to account for this variance?
As part of the projections, yes.
During the traffic counting, what methods were used to physically count the cars?
We have data collection devices that we have operators at the intersections, and we are inputting the data into a data collector.
So the data collector would be the rumble strips with the, or no?
No, we actually used turning movement counts. So these are manual data collection devices that, when I did the manual counts, they were hand clickers. Now it's a digital box.
So it's a human actually manually clicking.
Yes.
Okay, so, and there, you mentioned there was multiple counters or one single counter?
We had one counter.
Okay, so how do you count for human error?
We have a general, while the data collection is being done, I have a general observation taking place, so we're doing some cross-checking of that data taking place, general observation of traffic.
So the gentleman or woman didn't sneeze, didn't miss any cars, not one single car. 100% accurate all the time.
The data is very reliable in terms of the methods that we use to calculate, to compile data.
And those trip counters, are they calibrated? Are they checked for accuracy, for functionality?
Yes.
Okay. Were these counters that were used in this study, was that certification provided?
It's not certification, but we check our equipment out to make sure it works before we use it.
Okay. So according to your study, you state that the trip generation data was provided by the same school administration officials who commissioned the report. So to be clear, the traffic generated volumes were provided by Trinity Hall.
The enrollment was provided by Trinity Hall.
Okay, so how did you determine the level of traffic generated?
As I described in my testimony, we did 2 levels of analysis. We looked at, we made approximations about how many students would drive versus how many students would take a ride to the school by bus. We used a conservative estimate. The information we got from the school was approximately 25% would drive, 75% would use buses. We did an analysis assuming 55% would drive.
And you mentioned that your trip generation data was compared to CBA as...
No, the comparable count of CPA was done to corroborate the estimate of 25% utilization by car.
Okay, so the trip generation data that you developed, is that compared to a similar private institution of similar size, density, class configuration, and makeup?
It's really not a comparison you can make, no.
Okay, so you came up with a number of cars and then didn't compare it to any other types of institutions of similar...
We did a comparable count at CBA to determine if the 25% assumption of drivers, 25% assumption was realistic. And based on the count at CBA, their comparable percentage was approximately 25% in terms of using driving versus buses. So we felt that the 25% was a reasonable estimate of driving population. We used that as the basis to model our analysis as twice that. We doubled that number to be conservative. So we corroborated the 25% and we doubled it to be conservative.
Did you compare the data to an all-girls institution?
No.
So is it true that the basis of all your calculations, the level of service analysis, the increased traffic volume is based on the results of the existing condition traffic counts? All your level of service calculations are based on existing traffic data?
For the existing conditions, yeah.
So the analysis, again, is the conclusions of the report based on one single day's worth of traffic data. Is that correct?
Yes.
So how is it, in your analysis, you assume that 50% exits at Kings Highway and 50% exits at Route 35?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so you just discussed with Mr. Gazarovski that you did not have to analyze the intersection of Chapel Hill Road and Route 35.
Yes.
So the 50% that is going northbound, the 50% that is going southbound, what happens to that 50% that actually goes to Chapel Hill Road and Route 35?
Once the traffic exits the site, 50% of the traffic, there are other intersections where traffic can dissipate before it gets to 35, but the threshold of traffic that we anticipate don't exceed the level at which we felt the study was necessary. And that was corroborated by a review by the board professionals.
So you're saying is that traffic could dissipate through Sleepy Hollow and other smaller roads, residential roads?
Potentially some could, if they live in that area. In addition to that, though, based on the amount of traffic we expect to be generated by the site, when you take half of it, it's just not that much traffic.
Isn't it true that the township's engineer voiced concerns in their February 14th letter to the board over the traffic impacts on the two intersections, which one would be Kings Highway, which you've already said you analyzed, and the Chapel Hill Route 35 intersection?
Just Chapel Hill and Kings Highway was indicated in that report that we addressed.
You're 100% sure about that? You have the letter of the 14th?
I don't have the 14th letter in front of me. I have the March letter that I believe addresses all the concerns. I don't recall 35 ever being raised as a concern by the township.
Because I specifically got this comment where they cite that you're stating, I don't have it in front of me, bear with me, sorry.
You want the March 14th letter?
Both the attorney for the applicant and the professional from Middletown both have this letter. What is your question?
My apologies, I misspoke. A peak factor of 0.50 for arrival time was used in your analysis. How does this factor respond to a similar facility of size, makeup?
It corresponds to a concentration of traffic occurring within a 30-minute period, which is typical of school arrivals.
So did you compare this to, for instance, another all-girls school for corroboration?
It was corroborated with CPA. Their peak concentration was similarly approximately 30 minutes.
CBA is actually not an all-girls.
It's not an all-girls school.
Does your level of analysis, level of service analysis, excuse me, for the intersection of Chapel Hill Road and Mohegan Drive take into account car queuing in the proposed left turn lane?
Yes.
So according to the design, the dedicated left lane has a storage length of 75 feet. Is that correct?
Yes.
Based on your analysis, how can you guarantee that 75 feet is sufficient storage length?
Because the models we use provide a storage length for the queuing, and that queuing was less than 75 feet. At the direction of the board's engineer, the recommendation was made to further increase that to 100 feet, which testimony at the March hearing, I had agreed that we would expand that to 100 feet.
So it went from 75 to 100?
Yes.
So now it actually extends past the Mohegan Drive. The total size of the left-hand turn lane now extends past the entrance of Mohegan Drive?
No.
So just the queuing area is?
The queuing area is 100 feet in length. We have approximately 300 feet between the proposed site driveway and Mohegan Drive, so the queuing area is well north of Mohegan Drive.
All right, so how do you propose to ensure that a driver sitting at Mohegan Drive intersection will not have his sight line impacted?
Because we evaluated the line of sight at Mohegan Drive, and the left turn lane does not encroach that line of sight.
So that 100 feet will never get exceeded, 100% ever?
There's no 100% guarantees in anything.
That's fine, thank you. The proposed mitigation for the school's generated traffic is widening the road in front of the entrance and installing the turn lane. How does the applicant propose to widen the road?
We will, we'll,
I'll give you my 6 feet.
we'll,
Specifically,
I have to object. I think the question's out there, some kind of filter on the application. some substantial issue.
This
Now you're
is,
gonna build the road, it's kind of like, you know, get a contractor and build the
well,
road.
you answered the question that way. What I'm getting at is specifically, how does the applicant propose to encroach on private property on the east side of Chapel Hill Road?
We do not propose to encroach on private property.
So you will not impact the east side of Chapel Hill Road at all? So you will not build a retaining wall, you will not build...
That's not what it said. There's a right-of-way line, you're fully aware of that, you're an engineer, you said that in the first time. So there's a right-of-way line. Is it your testimony that the improvements will be within the existing right-of-way?
Yes, we may provide a dedication of right-of-way on our side of the site to accommodate some of the road construction, but we've done some preliminary road design, which we will be submitting to the township for approval. So
But no additional acquisition of right-of-way beyond what's there now, or what would be added to it by the applicant?
Yes,
On your side
yes.
of the road.
On our side, there may be an addition provided by the applicant, but on the east side, we anticipate no encroachment beyond the right-of-way line.
So in the right-of-way line, which stated exists, you will be responsible for relocating utilities?
Yes.
And where will those utilities go?
Within the right-of-way?
They will not exceed the right-of-way?
No.
Mr. Trinity, Trinity Hall, I think previous consultants have responded that Trinity Hall will have events such as extracurricular field hockey tournaments, track and field tournaments, swim meets, sort of things like this.
Yes?
And will any of these activities happen on the weekends?
I don't know.
So if they were to happen on the weekend, your traffic impact study does not examine the effects of weekend traffic.
It did not look at weekend traffic, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Well,
Anyone else? No. Any questions over here? I'm just going to shift this.
Your name and address, please?
Patrick Short, 16, 6 Carriage Drive, Middle County, New Jersey.
And just in case this ventures into testimony, please raise your right hand. Swear testimony about to give the board the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Thank you.
Recognize that this is for questions, though.
Yes, only for questions.
Can you spell your last name?
Sure. S-H-O-R-T.
S-H-O-R-T. And I just have a few questions, just to make sure I heard properly. We've taken into consideration the traffic along Chapel Hill Road. And I thought I heard that it also took into consideration the intersection of Chapel Hill Road and East Keith Highway, is that correct?
yes.
Has any priority been given to whether the route of traffic would be coming from Chapel Hill or East Keith Highway?
A general assumption was made that a 50-50 distribution was used in the analysis.
In reference to the first set of questions, that's bringing on the material onto the building site. Do you know the length of time that it would take to build phase 1?
Not specifically, no.
Has that been taken into consideration on the volume of traffic during that period of time?
Not at this stage of development, no.
Would it be fair to say that no consideration, if it hasn't been taken in for phase 1, it hasn't been taken into consideration for phase 2?
It's really premature, so yeah.
And phase 2 is at least twice as big as phase 1 per square footage of the facility.
For square footage, yes.
Reference to the type of vehicles that would be traveling, do you know how many trucks that it would take to bring the material to the site?
I haven't done an analysis of the construction activity, so no, I don't know.
And you don't know the size of the trucks that would be traveling?
No.
And you had mentioned that no priority would be given, maybe, I'm sorry, I thought 50-50 distribution between Chapel Hill Road and East Keith Highway. Would it be fair to say that traffic, the trucks bringing material in, could travel either road, Chapel Hill, or traveling east on East Kings Highway?
Again, it really hasn't been evaluated at this point, but I would assume any of the roadway networks that would permit truck traffic for construction would be considered by the contractor selected for the job.
And any consideration whether the trucks bringing in the material for the site would be coming from the north or south?
I don't have any specific knowledge.
So let's say if they come from the south on 35, they could either turn on Chapel Hill Road or they could turn on East Kings Highway and travel, I guess, east.
Conceivably, yes.
They could.
Yeah.
Have you been on the site to do a site survey?
Yes.
You have?
Yes.
And you've taken a look at what route did you take to the site? Which road?
I've traveled Chapel Hill Road, Kings Highway, Route 35. I've traveled all the roads in the vicinity of the site.
Would it be reasonable to say that trucks bringing material to the site, that they can use either one, Chapel Hill or East Kings Highway, that they can navigate easily coming up east on East Kings Highway?
It would really depend on the origin of the trucks in terms of what route would be more desirable.
And if they came on East Kings Highway, they could easily travel around those bends and make a right-hand turn on Chapel Hill Road?
Conceivably, yes.
Switching to the students, do you know how many students would be coming to the school in phase one?
The estimates that we provided was approximately 150 in the first phase.
And I thought I heard, and I can correct me if I haven't, that no study has been done about Highway 35 and Chapel Hill intersection.
Correct.
Has any study been done on Highway 35 and East Kings Highway?
No.
No. What is the plan of getting the students to the school?
Other than the busing, a busing plan would be provided by the school as part of the operation.
But no particular route has been designated?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
So no route has been taken into consideration. And if no traffic study has been done at Highway 35 and Chapel Hill, nor Kings Highway and 35, would it be fair to say no study has been done of Navasink River Road and 35?
That's correct.
And then the tributaries, traffic, if there reaches an obstacle, it's like water, they'll find its way to the site as water does. Then it'd be fair to say no traffic study has been done coming off Navasink River Road onto Patterson Lane.
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right here, yes.
You have your name and address, please?
Teresa Marino, 6 Iroquois Drive, Middletown.
Did you testify before?
No.
Please raise your right hand. Swear testimony about to give the board the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. And again, this is for questions.
Yes. What impact will the sporting events, and not just on the weekends as Mr. Young has asked, but during the week, will the sporting events such as track meets, lacrosse games, field hockey, swimming, and also theater performances have on the traffic on Chapel Hill Road? I didn't think, maybe I'm wrong, I don't remember reading that in your traffic study on how that would be impacted.
No, the traffic study focused on the peak operations of the school. So that would be the anticipation where traffic impacts would be the worst. During off-peak hours when you had other school activities, the expectation would be that any traffic impact would be less than what was evaluated at the peak hours.
But would that be true if there was, say, a theater performance with 600 attendees? Wouldn't the traffic at that time be even more possibly than a normal school day?
No.
Or swim meets or track meets where you have maybe 5, 6 schools participating and all those families?
Not necessarily. The arrival patterns are generally more widely distributed for those types of events. With the school operations during the arrival and dismissal times, You have a much higher concentration of activity in a shorter time period, so you have much greater impact. In addition, during those times of day, the background traffic on Chapel Hill Road is at a higher level, so the cumulative effect is a greater impact during those peak hours. The off-peak hours generally do not have the same intensity of traffic on the adjacent roads. Traffic spread out more, it's less of an impact.
But there would be an impact, correct? And it was not stated in the traffic.
There would be more traffic on the roadway, not necessarily an impact.
Okay. My other question is, the surrounding streets, when there is this, and I don't know what you call it, queuing possibly, outside of Mohican Drive up to the school entrance, what is to stop people if they don't want to wait in the queue, or if they're coming from Route 35 down Chapel Hill Road, they don't want to wait in that queue trying to get into the school, from coming down Comanche Drive, then cutting down my street of Iroquois Drive, and then cutting back out Mohican Drive. We have some concerns that, we have children that are outside waiting for their own buses, and with young drivers coming through, we have concerns about that. What can be done for that?
You have concerns about it?
Others as well. I mean, I personally do because well, then I will speak for myself, I live on Iroquois Drive.
Well, number one, you'd be describing a circuitous route where people would actually be getting off on Chapel Hill Road,
Correct.
traveling through adjacent streets to get back on Chapel Hill Road. It would be a circuitous route that I'd be very surprised if anybody would do. The left turn spot that we're talking about queuing on the roadway, we said that the analysis shows actually one car at any one time waiting for a turn movement. The gap study we did showed that there's more than sufficient gaps in the southbound traffic flow to permit this traffic to enter the site without a substantial delay. So it would not be a standing line of cars waiting to get in the site. It would just be a few seconds of delay while you're waiting for opposing traffic to clear to turn in.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
We will be at 333 Chapel Road this morning. And I had the pleasure of asking you some questions. A couple of things came to my mind. Talk about.
Use the mic, please.
You talk about the peak periods of traffic and testimony. What about unexpected congestion? Chapel Hill Road is a residential road. People live there. We have garbage collection from several vendors, recycling. We have brush collection, first responders. Okay. We also have a cemetery on the block. And what happens is you can't pass, and the bridge is only 18 feet wide. If that's an unexpected and unscheduled, it's nothing to do with peak, but that congests the entire road. There's no way to pass, there's nothing to do. Okay? So, in your traffic study, have you even considered something like that?
Well, with the exception of the cemetery, the events you described, these unexpected events you described regarding garbage collection and the like, you could say that about any residential street. Those activities occur in any residential development on any residential street. They are finite, isolated points in time. Generally,
There's a school up the street.
understood.
It's not typical.
The isolated events you're describing, the isolated events describing could occur in any street, and they are not typical conditions. What we analyze as part of evaluating the impact of a development, in this particular case, a school, we look at the typical daily operations and conditions. I can't plan for ambulance down any one street, and I can't anticipate what would happen there. What I can tell you does happen is that when you have these isolated events, is there's a short-term disruption of traffic flow, and then things normalize when that goes by. That's why garbage trucks typically collect garbage before and after major peak hours.
There's no schedule. They come whenever they want, pretty much. It's only a rough idea. And also, there are a couple, Comanche and Mohican development, where there's no other egress.
Right.
In other words, they're locked in. They can either come out on those street blocks.
which is why we have no access to those roads.
Okay. Also, Tilton is only one way in and one way out, so you're blocking those people. And they also have people and children who park there, including the buses and activity. Okay. And there's also been, before it was just touched upon, when you guys were asking about the accidents. You said there's minimal accidents. Did you get the report from police?
Yes,
reports?
yes.
And from the Chapel Hill, Oak Hill, 35 corridor to the top of Chapel Hill and Kingsway, meets Kings Highway, do you have any idea how many accident reports there were in 3 years?
That's stated in my report. We did look at the accidents. But again, primarily, we looked at the accidents along the frontage of our site.
Do you know the number?
I know the number. I've been published in my report. I know the number at our site, not at 35.
37 over a 3-year period. So you said it was minimal.
I don't know what area you're describing.
Well, the area from Chapel Hill, Oak Hill, Cloverleaf on 35 to the top of Chapel Hill Road in Kings Highway.
You're talking about the entire corridor of Chapel Hill Road.
Isn't that what we're talking about?
No, what I had said was I looked at the accidents occurring at the intersections I studied. The intersections I studied, the annual accidents, they weren't 5, they were 3 and 2, I think, they were low.
Are you aware of the turn that comes towards Whippoorwill when it goes straight and then it banks to the left?
Yes.
And every year, one of our neighbors, sometimes twice a year, his brick entrance gets knocked down. He's got a mason on staff. Many times horse fences and a telephone pole right there. 2 deaths on the road. 3 years ago, a horse was killed on the road. It's a very dangerous road. Okay, so all your traffic study is great, but it's not accurate.
We only did it for one day.
The danger of this road. I'm not even against that development. This is a very dangerous road to begin with. Putting 5 to 7 or more people on it is just not. It's not a question of the state of the land. Sorry about that. With your postal buttons.
And you were previously sworn in, right? Yeah, that's your name. Sure.
Valencia, V-A-L-E-N-C-I-A. Whatever.